Well, thank you for joining us with another episode of Insurance Gone Wild. I am your host, Dennis Settlemeyer, and our co-host is...
Stephanie Lencioni. Do it.
Stephanie Lencioni.
There it is. Yes.
I just like saying it.
Hey, I don't mind it. Now it's just habit. Now if you don't do it, I'm going to be disappointed.
Lencioni. She always teases me about I repeat it after she says it, but Lencioni. You know, it's really the only Italian word I know other than lasagna.
Well, if you go like this... Spaghetti. Now you know a third word.
Is spaghetti really a Italian word?
It's spaghetti.
Okay. All right.
Pasta.
But
only with the hand up. You know?
You got to put it with the hand
Otherwise, it's like, pasta. What are you, an American? Like, no. Pasta. Yeah, ooh, I'm an Italian.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I hear you.
My son says that he speaks Italian and American.
And American. Good for him, American.
Because he knows... Pasta. Anyway, he knows a couple words and he's like...
Does he eat pineapple on his pizza?
No.
Yeah, then he might have a little Italian in him.
Yeah. So,
anyway, there's a funny picture of it's some Joe Pesci movie where Joe Pesci's angry and they're holding him back, and it says the first time an Italian saw somebody put pineapple on a pizza, and he's like, you know? It's pretty funny. So.
Yeah, people have very strong opinions about that. Just like beans and chili. Very strong opinions depending on where you're from.
Yeah, I can do it both ways. I don't care. Just saying. Beans or no beans. I'm good. Well, we're gonna talk a little bit today about just some sort of a hodgepodge of subjects, really, maybe.
Maybe some random unknowns, some questions that we've gotten the last couple weeks, and just kind of random things that have maybe world issues, like current events that are going on right now, and that's kind of sparked some of the questions. And so hodgepodge, I like it.
Yeah, sort of a hodgepodge, and I think we'll talk a little bit about some stuff that I see, especially on Facebook. We'll talk about stuff that's going on in California. It's not as big in the news, but it's still going on. There's still things going on in California with the fires and, those sort of items.
But again, not even to focus on California, but what's happening there and then what people are hearing, whether through the internet or news or whatever, then it's those questions just kind of pop up. Like, well, could they do that?
Yeah.
Anyway. So we'll talk about those.
Correct. Yeah. That's part of the problem is you have the talking heads on TV that are saying one thing, and then there's a reality on the ground or in business with insurance as another. So one of the things that I see, and perhaps our listeners have seen, is insurance companies canceling policies in California.
Yep.
Canceling policies. That's the key word, canceling. And are they actually canceling policies so they don't have to pay out? Well, I would say no, they're not. And we talked about this right before we went on the air, that there's really only two basic reasons why an insurance company will cancel a policy. And so let me preface it with this. A insurance policy is nothing more than a contract. The insurance company says, hey, we're going to offer these coverages for a particular period of time, usually a year on homeowners, and in exchange for premium. Well, legally, they can't cancel that policy.
And I'm going to stop you right there. That is also the key. Legally. Because I do think there are things that insurance companies do that are not legal, which is why you then have bad faith claims and lawsuits and things like that. So
on the claim side, yes, I get it. Yeah.
But if they're doing it on claims, and there could be other illegal things being done too. So I would just like to say, we don't know every single policy that has been affected in California, right? But I would say, generally speaking, to what you were about to say, legally, two reasons for a policy to get canceled midterm. And again, you are saying canceled, which means midterm.
Yes.
So basically canceled versus non-renew, but go ahead.
Yeah, and that is it. Non-renewed is what they're generally doing.
We don't want it anymore.
We don't want it anymore. At the end of the policy period, whatever your policy was set to renew, they're going, yeah, we don't want it. And so people are saying, well, they canceled me. No, they did not cancel you. That is not a play on words. It's a legal terminology. They non-renewed you. They just don't want your business anymore.
Yes.
Now,
So go back for a second. Have you already said the two things?
I'm getting ready to.
Let's do that, and then let's dive into the other thing.
So the only way that they can legally cancel you is for basically two reasons. Number one is material misrepresentation. You told them something that was not true, and which would have disqualified you from getting their policy to begin with.
Yes, and the material part is the key, where it's, oh, well, I lied about... I thought I had 1.1 acres, but it was 1.3 acres. Okay, well, that was a misrepresentation.
But it's not a big
it wasn't
deal.
A material. They still were going to take you on, but maybe your premium would have been a little bit different because it's a larger lot. The material misrepresentation is, no, I don't have any livestock on my property. And you got 3 dairy cows in the back.
Or we don't have any pit bulls on our property.
We don't have any pit bulls. And yes.
That's a big one.
Those are the material part is key, because it's that if it's something where they would say, ooh, no, never mind, we wouldn't have written that in the first place. Okay, go ahead.
So the material representation, and you just don't pay.
Yeah, which is then on you because you didn't pay the premium.
Correct.
The contract being you have to pay, they promise to cover.
Correct. That's really the only two reasons that an insurance company would legally cancel you. Now, and I'm using the term legally strongly because the things that I see on Facebook and other places is that, well, State Farm has canceled X number of policyholders during the California fire. Well, they didn't cancel them. They were already set to non-renew. And so the state has come out and said, okay, you have to continue to carry insurance on them. You cannot non-renew them. You have to continue to carry insurance on them. Okay, that's fine, but what the politicians are saying, they're saying you can't cancel them. You can't cancel them. They were never set up for cancel. They were set up for non-renew. That's the two things that you have. That's two different words. They mean two different things.
Yeah, but from a politician standpoint who's not in the industry and they're not understanding, so maybe they know exactly what they're doing because they're firing people up and that's what politicians do. And California is a little bit different because they are so trying to control the insurance industry. But what I would say with the fire thing, and again, this is stuff I don't know and I really haven't looked too much into because quite honestly, I'm not sure what reliable source I can get. But where I think the issue lies is with all of the rumors and the things about, oh my gosh, well, with LA is going to be that smart city and that's why they set it on fire on purpose and whatever the allegations are. And they're like, yeah, because 3 months before, 5 months before, insurance companies were canceling policies. Okay, let's say that they were all non-renewed. But how often, and we've seen this too, markets, there are companies that are like, I don't want that market anymore.
Oh, absolutely.
So you get,
right now.
Right. So you get non-renewed by your current carrier. And then you have no options because nobody's taken on new business. I'm sorry, but that does feel like you were canceled. So you've been screwed one way or another, regardless of whether or not it was legal. The homeowner now feels completely screwed.
Yeah, and that goes back to the purpose of the podcast.
Right.
Is that we are consumers too.
Absolutely.
But we're also insurance agents, and we see both sides. So,
I don't see that side.
Well, the thing is that if we weren't insurance agents and we were looking and listening to that, we would think, well, they were canceled.
Right.
But we know that there's a difference between canceled and non-renewed. And these people were already set up for non-renewed. Now, let me say this. The politicians over in California, or their Department of Insurance, whatever it is, has told some of these companies, look, you can't not non-renew them. You have to renew them. And then they were saying, well, they weren't paying claims. They were canceling, not paying claims. Listen, here's how it works. You got to be careful with politicians and lawyers and stuff like that. I'm not saying there's not some truth to what they're saying, but they certainly will exaggerate it. Okay. So here's what's happening is that State Farm and Farmers and all those other companies that are out there, Mercury, and that they were maybe already had people set up for non-renew. The state steps in and says, you have to renew them. That's a political thing. Okay, renewal. If I'm State Farm or another company, I'll renew them. No problem whatsoever. You know
You're
why?
about to say something, but the state came in and stopped it. So go, why?
No.
Because
Why?
you'll make the premium. Yes, but the state came in and said and mandated how much they could or could not increase premiums.
No. I'm not talking about. We're going to get to that.
Because
I'm talking about just coverage in general. So what happens?
Are we out of the state of California right now?
No. Listen to me.
Okay.
Listen. State Farm is now collecting money on a home that doesn't exist because the policy that they were going to non-renew, let's say on March 1st, that home's already destroyed. Which policy covers that home that's destroyed? The current policy, the one that's still in effect, not the one that they were going to have to automatically renew. That term, the period is still they're at.
That's assuming they allow the gap.
No. There's no gap. There's no gap. Listen to me.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So let's say State Farm. I'm picking on State Farm because they're in the news. But let's say the insurance company, they have the house that got totally burnt down to the ground.
Okay.
There's nothing there. And it happened 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
But that policy wasn't set to renew or non-renew until March 1st.
Okay.
Okay? You're not going to pay.
Oh, so you're saying that policy was already in effect.
There's already a policy in effect.
Yes.
So now State Farm and all
so
these
now you're just going to collect money for
You're just
nothing.
going to collect money. But here's the trick side of it to it. How many people are going to continue to pay a premium on a home that doesn't exist?
Yeah, probably not many.
That's what I'm getting at. So the insurance companies, if people decide that, well, I'm going to pay it for 2 or 3 months, and they go, well, I don't even have a house. Why am I paying insurance? Well, State Farm and them, they didn't balk at it when the California Department of Insurance told them they had to renew it. They didn't say a word. All right, free money.
So
it's free money to them.
Okay, but that's not the issue because people aren't getting screwed over by that. As long as State Farm or said insurance company pays for the house that burned down in the previous policy.
You got to be careful listening to the politicians and the media. That's where I'm getting with.
Oh, well, that's just a good life lesson. About. How about, PSA, be careful when listening to the politicians. Thank you. Just to everybody everywhere. But
that's what I was getting at. You got to be real careful because I started out with the Facebook. See, I'm making a big circle. Remember we talked about that? Big circle. When you're looking at stuff on Facebook and listen to the junk on TV and whatever is on the internet, you got to be real careful to understand how so those homes that burnt down most of them were already covered. Most of them, not all of them.
I don't know the stats,
but most of them were already
I've not looked
covered.
Into it.
They were either covered by a private company like State Farm, Farmers, Mercury, Allstate, which Allstate, State Farm, and Travelers were the 3 biggest that got hit out there.
Okay.
And the California Fair Plan, which is if you can't find insurance, the state of California has a policy set up that you can buy. The problem is it is extremely underfunded. Extremely, they have like half a billion. They have like $200 million cash on hand, and they've got 5, 10, 15, 20 billion that they're going to have to pay out.
Oh, well, I mean, so like a small deficit.
Yeah. So how does that work? How does the California plan work? Texas, if you're in Texas, Texas has a Texas Fair Plan. California Fair Plan, the Texas Fair Plan. They're modeled, California, everybody models things off the Texas Fair Plan. So if you are on the Texas Fair Plan or California Fair Plan and the plan, which is the insurance company, the state insurance company, doesn't have enough money to pay, well, then what they do is they go out to all the insurance companies that are admitted. You got admitted, non-admitted, excess and surplus. We won't get into all the details.
Sure.
But they go to companies like State Farm, Farmers,
admitted. Allstate. Basically, it's your common easy peasy. If you know them as consumers, they're admitted.
So what they do is they say, okay, we're going to assess each of those different insurance companies, because they agreed, being part of the California market or Texas market, that if this happens, we'll pay a percentage based upon our market share. So if State Farm has 40% market share, like they do in Texas then whatever the assessment is, they get 40% of that assessment.
Wow.
So it's $1 billion or $2 billion. They still got to cough up 40% of that. Farmers maybe at 30%. They've got to cough up 30% of whatever that assessment is. So that's kind of how that works. In theory, the plan should never go bankrupt or ever become insolvent. And so when you have companies like State Farm that says we're pulling out of California because of the market, that's a big deal to the state fund, because now they're saying we're not going to participate in that. We're out. Geico, they shut down all their offices over there. You can only get insurance via 800 numbers now because they're trying to slow it down. They don't want as big a market share as they have in California. But it doesn't matter if it's California or one of the Carolinas or Florida, whatever it may be, it happens. So whenever the politicians come along and say, well, State Farm, you can't pull out. Well, that may also have something to do behind the scenes with the fact they need their money for the state plan. See, it's all connected. It's all connected, Stephanie. It's all connected.
I like it.
So
if you do this much longer, I may just like...
Does that work? All right.
Yeah.
All right. Story of my life. But yes, so you got to be careful on listening to the junk that's on Facebook and stuff. I'm not saying there's zero truth to it. There's little pieces of truth, but it's not always the whole truth.
And that's typically, again, the picture that we always get as consumers and as viewers, and as it's these tiny pieces. And you made the reference in one of the episodes before, and you're like, it's like this puzzle with all these pieces, and then sometimes they're double-sided, so you have to figure out which side of the puzzle it goes with. So and that's hopefully, and this is a little bit more of an intense kind of in the weeds topic or episode that we've been doing, but at the same time, I think it helps for people to understand legally, again, going back to legally, there shouldn't just be a fear of an insurance company waking up on a Tuesday in the middle of your policy saying, do you know what? I don't think we want to insure the Smith family anymore.
Yeah.
Denied. Canceled.
Yeah.
Like that's not what's going to happen.
That's not really what happens. They may deny a claim. I'm not saying that. But to cancel your policy straight up.
That's a little more,
They can get in some trouble for that. They got to have a reason for that.
Right.
Generally.
So and then that would be, again, in the North Texas market, we've run into that a lot. There are, and where they are probably more okay with it is that they're not pulling out of the state of Texas. Typically, they are pulling out of 6 or 7 counties.
Yes.
And so they're like, oh, no, we're not saying we're not a part of Texas. We just are tired of buying roofs.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we're tired of doing.
That's really what's happening right now. There's a lot of companies that are still writing in the state of Texas. But this 5-6 county area, no, they're just not doing it. Which is, you also have Houston, which lots of times we don't write in Houston anyway, or closer to the
coast,
Gulf, to the coast. They don't write down there anyway. There's companies that specialize in that. So that's not really a big deal. But the bigger deal is when they say these 5 or 6 counties in North Texas. Why these 5 or 6 counties? Why not the other 40 counties or however many there are? Well, this is where all the people live. Right. This is their biggest exposure, right? You get out into some of these other counties, they don't have nearly the exposure. Yeah. What's the county at Stephenville?
Erath County.
Yeah, there's not as big of exposure over there as there is in Tarrant.
Yeah, it's more of a town than it is a city.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still...
So they're not going to pull out of Erath.
A hip-hop happening place.
Oh, of course.
But, of course, he says. I love that.
Going back to the California stuff or anything along those lines, Texas has a fair plan when you can't get insurance anywhere else, or you have...
And it's not the plan you want.
It's not horrible.
Does it cover all of like personal property and things like that?
Yes, it's not a horrible plan. It's really not. Because we write through the Texas Fair Plan when we can't get, you have to have at least, I think it's 3 other companies turn them down, and they cannot. You cannot have an offer from your current company for a renewal.
Okay.
So
kind of 4 stipulations.
Yeah. So 3 turn you down, and you can't have a non-renewal. You have a non-renewal, and then you can write through the Texas Fair Plan, but it only goes up to. I'd have to ask one of my folks because I don't do as much home and auto anymore, but I think it only goes up to maybe $1 million home.
Okay. So a 3-bed, 2-bath.
Yeah,
in the Metroplex.
But yeah, it's not a horrible policy. Is it lacking in some areas? Yes, but it's better than some of the other stuff that's out on the market that we could write you through that you probably not going to like.
Interesting. Okay.
So it's very uncommon that we can't at least get somebody some policy through a company somewhere.
Whatever that means.
Before we have to go to Fair Plan. Now, they may not like the coverages they have. It may be actual cash value, which a steep percentage. That means depreciation if there's a claim. They're just not going to pay anything. Whereas the Texas Fair Plan will still pay replacement cost.
I feel like we should have looked at that for my house.
You would not qualify because too many other companies were willing to look at your house.
I don't feel like they want it.
Yeah.
Not when they're charging me what they're charging me. They don't want it.
I'm telling you.
They don't want it. And I'm here to tell you folks, I don't want it.
Wait till it goes up again. It's going to go up again.
Duh.
It's going to go up again.
Absolutely.
There's nothing you can do. It's like the price of eggs. What are you going to do?
Eat steak instead.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. But I can't not insure my home. I guess I could just pay it off.
You could pay it off.
Call 817-753-0093 and please send us more policies. No, but I wanted to touch on something. It was kind of spinning off of something that you said earlier, but then also another question. Mm-hmm. We were talking about the Houston area. And it's a totally different world. It really is a totally different market. But so when you think of Houston, like what's the number one insurance coverage that people think of immediately?
Well, I don't know that people think of it unless you're down there, but hurricane is the issue.
Yeah, flood, right? Hurricane flood. But because hurricane's going to hit a certain amount, but then it's the flood that that's the extensive damage everywhere else. But, and hey, Dennis, is flood from, what do you call it? Nature? Like rainwater? Rising groundwater. Is that covered on a standard homeowner's insurance policy?
No.
No, it is not.
No.
So what's unbelievable, again, speaking in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we actually have quite a few homes in flood zones.
We have a lot of flood zones in the DFW area.
You don't have to be near open water in a coast to be in a flood zone.
No.
The first little house that my husband and I bought, it was just little whatever, blah, 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 right in the middle of the city. And they're like, oh, well, you have like a corner of your house that's a flood zone.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Let me go with that a little bit. So I have realtors will call me sometimes, and they're like, we've got this property, and the mortgage company is saying they have to have flood insurance. But it's just like the back 10 feet of the property that's in the flood zone. Here's the thing. The insurance company doesn't control what's in the flood zone or if you have to have insurance. It's the mortgage company that determines if they are requiring you to have flood insurance. And I get that question actually often from realtors. And it may be 3 acres, 5 acres, whatever it is, 10 acres. But generally I can tell. What I do is I look up on the flood map, FEMA flood. And I think it's MSC, M as in Mark, sc.fema.gov. You can go there and look up your address and see. Yeah,
it'll tell you. It ranks you.
Well, no, not a rank. It's actually a map.
It codes you. I know, but I understand it's a map.
You got the codes, the X's and the B's,
which is the ranking or the coding. Yeah. So it'll tell you what type of flood zone or non-zone you're in.
It doesn't. Here's the thing about the flood zones. If you look it up and you have an X as a flood zone, you're not in a flood zone. If it's any other letter, you're in a flood zone.
Right.
Doesn't matter. Now, the letters determine on what kind of flood zone you're in, but you're in a flood zone. But anyway, the realtors will call, well, it's only like the back 10 feet. and you pull up the map and they're surrounded by a flood zone, and it's just like 2 or 3 houses that are just high enough that they're not in a flood zone. I'm like, you're not going to win this battle. You might as well just go ahead and bite the bullet. Now, the good thing is that sometimes you need to get you can get a elevation certificate from an engineer, which means they come out and literally see how high up you are.
Right.
Sometimes it'll show, but the reality is it's really up to the
mortgage company.
The mortgage company if they want you to have flood zone or not. But going back to your question, no rising groundwater. So if you have a part of your yard floods every time it rains really hard and it comes into the house, that's not
covered.
That's not covered on homeowners. That wouldn't even be covered on a flood policy, because that's not considered flood. That's considered landscaping. That's the way they will describe it to you.
Interesting.
Landscaping. You didn't know that one, did you? Gotcha.
I didn't, because so again, we were in this flood zone, and we had to have, it was awesome.
Are you talking about the one over that?
Yeah. We didn't find out until like a week before closing.
Nice.
Because they said no on the seller's disclosure, and then all of a sudden,
that's not a cheap surprise either when you're in a flood zone.
No, it wasn't.
Was it $1,200 at the time?
At the time, and
Probably
it was
$2,000
for
or
a huge
$3,000 now.
deductible.
Yeah.
And it covered nothing. It covered none of the interior stuff. So none of our personal property was covered. It was literally just the house. That was it. But anyway, and it would, like, every time it rained, if it sprinkled, and like, well, there's Lake Lenchoney in the back, and there were a couple times that it absolutely did, because it was that May that year, like, that was like the first spring that we were just getting nailed, and we had all of the floods in Dallas, and people were, getting stuck in their cars and blah, blah, blah. But, it was knocking on the door, and it came into our neighbor's house. But I feel like that would have been flood. Would that not have been flood? The
in
entire
that area,
thing was.
It could be, because what it has to happen, and this is where they get, especially FEMA flood, because that's where you.
I tell you what, I would have been real pissed off if I was paying for this thing.
It has to be.
And they're like, your landscaping's not up to par.
Yeah, it has to be like 2 properties within a same proximity.
Okay, fair. Okay.
Or so many acres.
Sure.
So here's the thing, that because I remember, hammering them hard on this. Give me a definition for proximity. They would not give me one.
See, and
they
that
would not. I said, is that the house next door, the house behind, or the house a block away?
They're like, we'll let you know after it happens.
That's exactly basically what they were saying.
Yeah, we'll let you know once it happens.
No. That doesn't work. And if I'm somebody and you've got water all around me, there may be only 2 houses in an area, but they may be 100, 200 yards apart, and everything around it's flooded. Is it still a flood, or is it not a flood?
Yeah.
That's the thing about flood insurance is people lots of times complain, well, they didn't pay anything. They didn't pay hardly anything. Here's the problem you run into on flood. Most agents will write it because they know it's expensive. They'll write it for dwelling only. So that's
I didn't want to pay. That's what I had, because we didn't want to pay.
People don't want to pay it.
We didn't want to pay.
But when you have a claim, you're like, crap, I should have paid it, because you know how expensive it is to clean the soot and not the soot, but the mud and stuff out of your clothing and things along that.
Why do you think we started having kids?
Your homeowners won't pay for it.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, right.
Your homeowners won't pay for that. So you've got to try to figure out a way to salvage all that stuff, unless you got the money sitting around to buy new furniture and all those sort of things. So we will give people the option. Like, look, here's dwelling only. Also, it also has to be at least 80%. Remember the 80% rule?
Oh, sure.
So the 80% rule says you have to insure your home, your dwelling, for at least 80% of the reconstruction costs, so you can get full value of whatever number you chose. If you do less than that, everything's depreciated. So the problem that I run in, or the thing that I run into with people that say, well, we had a flood and didn't pay anything, I know what your policy was. Right. You had a crap policy because the insurance agent did not explain to you the 80% rule, or didn't offer you property coverage.
And
if you have a pool You better add that on there too, because that pool gets full of mud. If you don't have that pool added onto your flood policy, you got no coverage to get that cleaned out.
Okay, so is that like a specific... Okay, so hang on. Two things. First, I was going to say, or... Because now I don't know... Did you do our flood policy? Or was it somebody else?
I honestly don't remember.
I don't know. That was so long. That was so long ago.
Probably charged you a fee.
Probably, which is why we couldn't afford the personal property.
Yeah, I don't do that. That's a running joke. So.
Yeah, no. Anyway, but I know I don't recall if somebody explained like, hey, with.
They didn't. I'm sure.
Well, you know what? No, but I knew what we were giving up. I knew we were giving up the personal property thing. But so I was going to say it's not necessarily the bad agent. It could just be the person who was trying to save the buck at the beginning.
No, it could be. But let me go back to the agent thing. You're correct. It's always up to the consumer what they want to do.
Yes, and they don't typically. I would say typically they're not going to walk somebody through repercussions.
Yeah, we do, but not everybody does. But here's the other thing. And I don't mean this in a negative way like I do in some other cases with other agents. Right. Not all agents, but some agents. Flood is very confusing. And unless you write a lot of it or you research it and try to understand it, agents like, I can write a flood policy. And they just go out and they write a flood policy and give it to somebody. But they don't understand it.
Right.
And it's innocent ignorance. That's the best way I can describe it. They're not doing it intentionally, like some of the commercial stuff that I run into, or some of the homeowner stuff that I run into, where you can tell this is
blatant.
This was blatant. But on flood, I usually give a little bit of leeway with agents because it is so confusing as to how it works.
Okay, fair.
On other things I beat them up, but on this, they just don't know. And again, and I've said this before. We come in and sometimes we have to be the educator, which makes us look like the bad guy, which makes us look like sometimes, well, all they're trying to do is get more money out of me. We don't care about that. We're just trying to help you. You got to make the decision.
Yeah. Where do you want to put your risk?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you willing to risk? And sometimes you do good. It's like throwing the craps, the dice. You roll the dice and you do good. And other times it's like, oh, I should have paid that extra.
Yeah, I'm telling you, there were a couple times where the water.
Our first home in Missouri.
Laying our cat out to hopefully absorb the water so it didn't go in the
cat. Yeah.
In the she was sweet. May she rest in peace.
We had a pier and beam home, which is a little more common up there than they are down here. Because we can actually do basement homes up there, and they don't do many down here in Texas because of the ground
shifts.
But we had a little ditch behind us, and every time it came a hard rain, it would flood. And it would flood all around our house. And we had a pier and beam. We had a couple openings back here. It would get up into the foundation of the home. Well, as soon as it quit raining, and you'd walk out, it'd look like a river.
Right.
A big creek, a big muddy creek just flowing past us all around our house, things like that. But as soon as it quit raining, it receded really, really quick. We never had a problem.
Right.
We never had a problem. But we didn't have to get flood insurance, which was weird. Because we were literally getting flooded almost every time it came a big rain.
Wow.
And then they started building homes upstream, let's call it. And
you're so country. You're not saying that in the DFW.
No, it was upstream that they were building homes, which made it didn't even have to rain as much when we start getting flooded because the water has nowhere to go.
Right.
Right. And that's the other thing that we have down here in DFW. While the Corps of Engineers, which controls all of that, does a very good job, you can't calculate it exact every time. So there are places like in Irving that are flood zones that didn't used to be flood zones. South Irving, especially.
And it changes, yeah. So there are people and they're like, I have never been in a flood zone. And now all of a sudden it's like, well, but also... You also had a lot of open land around you for the last 40 years or however long. And now we're building more homes and we're doing this. And that changes the land and it changes the pathway.
In South, because my office was in Irving, which you'd been there a few times, but in South Irving, 1 week I got 5 phone calls for flood insurance. Like, I never get phone calls for flood insurance. What is going on? Well, they had updated the maps.
Right.
And now all of a sudden the mortgage companies are sending letters to these homeowners saying, you got to get flood insurance. You're in a flood zone. You got to get, now I think they went back and amended some of those. So that slowed down, but yeah, we had like 5 or 6 flood policies. I hadn't had 5 or 6 flood policies in that area in a year.
Yeah.
Or more.
Okay. So I want to go back to something else that you said that could be helpful for people. You said list the pool. Tell me more about this.
Okay, so on a flood policy, there is literally a place that says, do you have a pool? Do you want coverage for the pool? Because when you get that kind of water coming, it's dirty, muddy, it's pushing all sorts of debris and everything. If you have a pool, it's going to fill that sucker up with crap. If you don't have that pool on that policy, you're probably not going to have coverage to clean it out. And I'm going to tell you.
And that's a big deal. That's expensive.
That's a huge deal to clean a pool out.
Yeah. And then
nasty.
It's still sucking and working. And now you have to clean the entire filtration and the things and anything that breaks in the meantime because it got clogged up. Yeah. Okay. The other thing I want to talk about is, well, let me ask you this. I was going to say something else, but I'm going to ask it this way. Do you recommend people to buy flood insurance, even if not in a flood zone?
I think it depends. I have, yes. Because if I suspect they're near a flood zone, absolutely. Now, are they going to buy it? Most people don't. I'll be honest with you, but I will recommend it. I've done my due diligence. Now it's up to them. Because you have places maybe over in Benbrook or something where you have entire neighborhoods that some are in a flood zone, some are not in a flood zone. And the ones that aren't in a flood zone, okay, you're pretty far away from it. Probably not going to recommend it. But if you're close to it, you might want to consider a flood zone because, and I mentioned this before, 25% of floods happen in places that never flood before.
I was going to bring that up. And that's the thing. And keeping in mind for the consumers out there, again, if you're not sure, go to the website, MSC, what is it?
MSC.FEMA.gov will give you, it'll tell you real quick.
So you look at the map.
Your address, and it'll tell you if it's not an X for the flood zone, you're in a flood zone. So,
and then purchasing, if you are not in a flood zone, so if you are deemed X on that map, it's pretty inexpensive.
If you're not in a flood zone?
It's pretty inexpensive.
It's not bad. The thing about flood insurance,
and especially just to get something in case. Yeah. I mean, that would, if you're close. Yeah. Because again, 25% is 1 out of 4 homes. That's a lot.
It's significant.
That is significant. Because when we were doing a lot with that trial when we first started our business, we got a ton of Houston area stuff.
Yes.
And I would specifically talk to people, and that was a big thing. I'd have to look like, are you in a flood zone? What's going on? And many of them were not.
You kept asking me for the website.
I just need to bookmark it, damn it.
I remember that.
But
what's that website again?
I'm like, I just can't remember. I know. I'm usually better than that. Sorry about that. It was
crazy times though.
It was really
nuts.
Weird.
It was a great thing that happened, and we're not going to talk about.
We proved a concept, baby.
Which turned into something very big for another company.
You are welcome. But we walked away from it.
You are welcome, homeowners of America.
Ooh, you did that, yeah. But a lot of the conversation I would have, I'm like, I know you're not in a flood zone. But I have also included a flood quote for you, just and then we talk about it. And I'd say about 25% of them not in a flood zone took it. But I highly recommend.
Hey,
it's
listen,
definitely in the Harris County.
Here's the problem that you run into with flood insurance is you have to pay it all up front. There is no monthly payment.
Right. So you're not escrowing. Oh, you could escrow it. Yeah, that's right. You can.
Or you got to pay it out of your pocket all up front. Well, what happens? You've bought a few homes. I've bought a few homes. When you go to sit down, what do you got to bring to the table?
Money.
You got to bring money. And it's like a lot of people are just they're just scratching everything they can together to get the house. I get it. It's not a judgment call, a judgment on them. I understand it because I've been there. I mean, it's just, I'm robbing Peter to pay Paul so I can get this home. I don't have enough money to buy another $1,000 flood policy that I'm not even in a flood zone.
But it wasn't even that much. I mean, back then it was not even, I mean, it was like
$300 or something.
A few hundred. And you're like, you're buying a $300,000-$400,000 house at the time. Like, I feel like 1% would be worth it.
Yeah. And the other thing is that flood insurance, flood insurance only goes up to about $275,000 for a home.
Okay.
In order to get, if you have a home that's worth more than that for reconstruction, you have to get excess flood policy. So now you have two policies that you have to buy.
Yeah.
So it becomes very, very tricky, and it can get expensive even if you're not in a flood zone when you have to buy two policies. Commercial gets crazy expensive. Because there's commercial flood, that's a whole other thing.
Right.
It goes up to a certain amount, then you have to get excess commercial flood and those sort of items. But it's an important coverage that I think certain people really, even if you're not in a flood zone but you're close to one, you better go ahead and get it.
Yeah.
Because you never know, especially with all the building that's going around, where's the water going to go?
And that's the thing. And sometimes them deeming you in the flood zone is a little too late.
Yeah.
Because the building's happening, and I don't know that process. I don't know when they reevaluate and then when they send those letters out. Mm-hmm. But then there's also that whole process of that happens, and then if it's the mortgage company who's the one determining it, it's not like they're sending you a letter saying, "Hey, just letting you know you're in a flood zone." It's the mortgage company saying, "Hey, just want to let you know
you're in a flood zone.
You're in a flood zone.
And you better
buy and we need something."
Yeah.
So,
or we're going to put it on you.
Yeah, and it's not something that you have to check all the time, but yeah, just be aware of it.
No, the mortgage company will let you know. Yeah. If you've already bought the house, or either if you're buying the house, the mortgage company is going to let you know. Well, but there's a new flood.
No, I mean, if you're not in the flood zone.
No, that's all I'm saying. Kind of change the subject slightly. There's a new flood chart that's like, and I don't even know how it works, to be honest with you. But are you in a flood zone? But then you're rated like 1 through 10. It's a whole different thing. I'm old school. I go to FEMA. I look up, are you an X or are you another letter? That's all I need to know. I mean, if you get in coastal stuff or Hawaii, you could end up with a Z or another letter or something besides X or a C. I don't know what the letters are. I used to know, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
We were an A, I think, which was 100-year.
The 100 or 500-year. It's usually what you're looking at.
Yeah.
Either the 100-year or the 500-year.
We were 100. Whatever letter that was.
And the thing is,
it sucked.
It will flood within that time frame. So you better be careful where you're at in that historical aspect.
Yeah. And I was like, what? How are we in a flood zone? We are what?
Right in the middle of town. Yeah.
And then as we were driving around, like you take different ways to get in and everything else, I was like, oh, there's like a waterway right here.
Yeah.
Okay. So I get it.
Yeah.
But you don't, and mostly it's dry. It's just this empty, big, huge ditch thing.
There's a flood zone. Is it,
but,
what is the area? If you go down Highway 121 toward Fort Worth, and you're almost into Fort Worth on 121, on the north side.
By Topgolf?
Yes, but on the north side of the highway. Is that Haltom City? No.
No, that's Fort Worth.
No, it's back a little bit. It's another little town. But anyway, in that general area, right here, not far from, there's a big flood area. And I have a client that I've had for years, and they said, we're in a flood zone. I'm like, you're a what? In a flood zone?
Wow.
And I looked it up. Sure enough, they're in a flood zone. There is a creek that goes through there that has potential to flood during really, really heavy rains. And I was surprised because I would not have thought, because there's some hills and stuff in there. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, no, like right here, you're not in a flood zone. Mm-mm. I wouldn't recommend, because we record at your house. I would not. That. Well, they don't know where you live. 1, 2, 3, 4 ABC. No, you are not in a flood zone here.
No.
So I wouldn't, and you don't really have a flood zone around you. So I would recommend a flood policy for you.
So I should cancel my flood policy.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
No, I got to buy cigars. We got to keep.
Oh, sorry. Would you like my fee before?
Exactly.
Or okay.
Where I live, I'm up on a little bit of a hill. As you're going up a hill, I'm not in a flood zone. I mean, if it floods at my house, we got a lot more problems.
Look for the ark, baby.
Yeah. Exactly. But there are places in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that are in flood zones, out in the country, literally in town, whatever it may be, that are flood zones. And so, but rising, let me go back in because we need to wrap up, but rising groundwater, like the backyard floods, you're not necessarily in the flood zone, the backyard floods, and you're getting water in your house, they consider that landscaping issues. Take care of the landscaping. Now, I did speak to a lawyer.
Judgy Much Insurance Company?
Yeah, I did speak to a lawyer, and I don't know all the details on this. I'm going to throw this out there just for people to think about. My understanding from speaking with this lawyer is that in the state of Texas, everybody that owns their home is responsible for their water. So if you have water running off of your home and flooding the neighbor next to you that's coming into your, not flooding, but it's going into their house, but it's originating from your property, you're the one that's responsible for it, not the neighbor.
Okay. Are you saying from the rain perspective?
Yes, from the rain. Yes. Yes. You are responsible for your own water issues in the state of Texas. I am not putting everything on. I'm not putting all my money down on that.
It's not the hill you're dying on.
But that's what I understood.
So I heard something, like I understand where if you do some, I mean, I don't disagree with that. There's something to that sounds familiar to me, because I do know if you change something in your backyard, your landscape, whatever.
Correct.
And that causes then an issue to your neighbors, then yes, then you've caused. So yeah, so I think there's reasoning. Definitely validity to that.
Yeah. Same line of reasoning. So
we're not going to die.
We're not going to die on that hill because that's outside our area of expertise. Not where, but call the lawyer your attorney. But I talked to, that was a little bit of their expertise, and that's what I understood. And I'm like, that's interesting, because my neighbor has tons of water running off theirs, and I had to put in a massive French drain system. This is a true story. I had to put a massive French drain system because the water kept trying to come into the house. And I like my neighbor, so I'm not pushing it. But I could have went to them and said, yeah, you need to pay me for some of this.
Or you need to stop it. Like, they don't need to pay you for it. Like, they just have to stop the water from coming in.
And but I didn't push it.
Well, because who wants that conversation?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I also don't want to pay for a French drain that I shouldn't have had to. Yeah. So that's a tough deal.
Well, I had foundation work done at the same time, and they didn't throw it in. They charged me for it, but it was like, just go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
I need to have it done, because I'm not going to ask my neighbor for that stuff. So, but I could. And actually, the water issue isn't even my neighbor's. It's from the person behind him who built some dadgum 2-story shed. Literally, that's what it is. If you saw it, if I should come over, I'll show it. It's a 2-story shed that whenever they built that's when we started having water problems. It wasn't draining correctly, going the different direction. I could go back to that neighbor, which I don't know, and say, you need to do that. But it's probably sold 3 times since they did that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, now you can't.
I mean, what are you going to do? Yeah. I can't do anything. So...
And we're not encouraging you to go out and sue your neighbors if you're having a drainage issue. Excuse me.
What hill do you want to die on? That type of thing. But
and then at some, like, before they start forking over money, everyone's then going to have to prove it, and then blah 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 and all the things. You're just saying that there's, it's just water, landscape. So the landscape issue, that's what it all boils down to. That wouldn't be considered flood. That would be like, hey, take care of your own situation. And then, but the tidbit there that I would say, the takeaway is, if you've not had any flooding or water issues, and then all of a sudden a neighbor does make some sort of improvement, and then now you're starting to have an issue, then I would say notify them as quickly as possible.
Correct.
And let them know, hey, I just got to let you know. So start that process. But again, that's just something to look for, be aware of.
All right, we're going to wrap it up. This has been Insurance Gone Wild with Dennis and Stephanie, and we would love to hear from you guys. Our phone number is 817-753-0093, and our email address is contact@igwpodcast.com. Reach out to us. Ask us a question. We'd be glad to spend some time giving you an answer on that. And I think that is about it. We're going to wrap it up for today. Thank you for joining us.